Blazor Server allows C# developers to create single-page applications on the web without using JavaScript. One of the features of Blazor Server is the use of Razor components. In fact, all pages in Blazor Server are actually just components. In this video, we're going to see how to layer these components together into a flexible, powerful page. Along the way, we'll identify how to pass data into the components, how to style them, and more. Now, if this is the first video you've watched of mine, my name is IAmTimCorey, and it's my goal to make learning C# easier. One of the ways I do that is by teaching context. There are a lot of tutorials out there that teach you what to do. I go a few steps beyond that to show you when to do it, why you should or should not do it, what pitfalls to avoid, and what the best practices are. Basically, I get you ready for the real world. If that's the type of training you're interested in, subscribe to my channel and hit the little bell icon to be notified when I release new videos, about twice a week. Now, if you find that you want even more Blazor Server content, I did just release a course recently titled Blazor Server In Depth. It covers a ton of ground, from learning all about the parts of Blazor through authentication, data access, and even deployment. The link to the course is in the description, along with a link to download the source code from today's video. Okay, let's go to Visual Studio, and we're going to create a new Blazor Server project. Now you can just type in here Blazor, and after a second it should come up with Blazor App right here, and we'll hit Next. And I'll call this Blazor App, and I'll call this a Components demo. Now, I have installed both Blazor Server App and Blazor WebAssembly app. As of right now, Blazor WebAssembly is not yet released for production use. It's in a preview phase. It's coming out very, very soon. So just note that's the difference, is Blazor Server has been out since .NET Core 3.0 back months ago. So it's been out in production, ready to be used in production for months. All right. So we're using ASP.NET Core 3.1 Blazor Server App. We're not going to put authentication on this. We will make sure it's configured for HTTPS. We're not going to use Docker. I'll hit Create. And it's going to create for me my Blazor Server App. Now, if you've never seen a Blazor Server App before, let's run this. I'll use the IS Express. I could do the drop down right here. And notice there's also Blazor App right here. This is Kestrel. And I cover more about that in my course, but essentially what this is a privately hosted web server instead of a full IS Express. So it's a little bit different. This one's more like a console window that shows you some really cool stuff in the console. We'll stick with the IS Express for now. For this demo, it doesn't really matter. We're not going to be doing too much debugging on the console. All right, so it started off screen, but here is the Blazor app. So it says, hello world, welcome to the new app. How is Blazor working for you? This is something new they've added just recently. So if you don't have this, that's probably because you have a little bit older version of a Blazor server. No worries, it's just a little link they put in there for a survey. Okay, counter, if we click this, notice the counter goes up, and we're not doing a page refresh here. That's the big thing about Blazor, is we're not doing a page refresh. We're just using the signal R in the background to communicate and just transfer the bits we need. All right, so fetch data, just fetch new data. This is all random, but it's new. So if you notice 54C, and now it's 10C. So this is just randomized every time you go to this page. Okay, so let's close this out. We're gonna create a new page. So let's create a page under Pages is fine, and we're gonna call this task list. Okay, so we're creating a new item. Don't create a Razor page. That's not correct. A Razor page is just what it says it is. It's a Razor page. And so you have a Razor Pages application. What it is a server-side only page. And so anytime you have to submit data, it's going to do a full page refresh. This is what Blazor allows us not to have to do, is a full page refresh. Okay, now, just so you know, you could put a Razor page in here and it will work as a Razor page. It won't have the Blazor client-side stuff, but it will work as a Razor page. And the reason why is because this technically is just an ASP.NET Core web application. what it uses internally, whether it is API, MVC, Razor Pages, Blazor Server, or even Blazor Client, that's all just add-on, really, to an ASP.NET Core web application. So that's why we can actually use Razor Pages and Blazor together if we want to. We don't, though. Let's hit New Item. We're going to choose Razor Component. And I know this is confusing, and I talked about this before. It's a Razor component that is a Blazor page. Why those two are named the same, I'm not a big fan. We've kind of overused things. Just like we have Blazor Server and Blazor Client side, that's also confusing to me if you search for Blazor and you don't know if the examples you're getting are for client side or for server. So that's why I say Blazor Server all the time. Now in this video, I'll probably say Blazor, but you know it's for Blazor Server, what this video is titled about, okay? So in this case, Razor Component means a Blazor page, or actually a Blazor component, okay? So, and we'll see what the difference is because it's really the same thing. So let's call this task list, okay? And this is the task list. Now I'm going to give this an @page directive that says if you go to task list, so your URL /task list, you'll go to my task list. Okay? Now, without doing anything else, I've just added that one thing at the top that says @page /task list. I can go to my URL and say /task list, and there's my task list page. Okay? So I've now shown you how to create a brand new page in Blazor. But we're going to talk about components today. So let's first build this out as if it were a full page. So I'm going to create a few things. First of all, I'm going to go to Data. I'm going to right click. I'm going to add a new class. This is going to be a model for my tasks. So task model. And in here, I'm going to have two things. So first, a string that is my task. And I'm going to have a bool that is complete. Okay, and by default, it'll be false. So there's my task model. Now, here's a thing that's a little tricky, a little interesting. And again, I cover more of this in my course, but I want to be complete here. The _imports.razor file. This is a whole bunch of using statements. These get applied to your Razor pages. And again, there's a hierarchy you can do here, but essentially in this level right here, they apply to all Blazor pages, which end in a .razor. So I can add a using here, and it will show up or be useful over here. So I don't have to keep saying @using Blazor app.data if I have multiple pages that use the data. So I can just say @using Blazor app.data. And now I can reference that model without having to have either the full name or a using statement on this page. All right? So we're going to say private, actually let's do a prop and say a list of task model. And we'll call this task list. Oops, let's not make a property. A new list of task model. There we go. So one of the things about Blazor is that you can reference private variables on the same page because this code is a part of this page. And I've covered it before, so I'm not going to go too much in depth here. We can separate this out into a different class file. There's two different ways of doing that. But we're not going to do it in this demonstration because it's kind of outside of scope. However, just note that this private means it only applies to the task list page, but that includes the code, the HTML layout, and the actual code. So we have our task list. Now let's create a private task model called new task. And we'll instantiate that. And now I think we can just create our form. So let's create a form here to start taking in tasks and put them into this task models list. Okay, so let's create an edit form. Now I have found it's better to close this out and then come back here to add your model because of IntelliSense. It likes it better. So if you leave it open, it reads this as code and it struggles. So close it out and come back to it. But a edit form needs a model, where I say the model is the new task. Okay, and we also are going to have an onValid submit. Now an onValid submit means if you validate your data, which we're not going to, but if you validate your data, then it will only submit if the data is valid. All right. And so we need to have a method here. So let's do a private void add task down here. And then up here, we can just say add task. Now, just want to point this out because this is a little bit different. For the model, you have to use the @ symbol, which is the razor syntax. And the razor syntax just basically says, this is now C# after me. Okay, so new task is C# code, not HTML. So you have to use the razor syntax here, but in the onValid submit, you do not have to use, in fact, you should not use the @ symbol. Okay, so one of each. The model, yes, you use it. On the onValid submit, no, you don't. All right. So let's create an input text, and we'll say @bind value equal to new task dot task. So this input field is going to bind on the task field of that string. And then we'll have a button. And we'll say type equals submit. And we'll say add task. Okay, so there's a little form. When you click the submit button, it's going to call this add task method. All right, that's onValid submit. Well, what's add task going to do? Well, it's going to say task list dot add, task models, which that should be task models, actually task list. There we go, much better. Task list dot add, and we're going to add our new task. And you're saying, well, Tim, how do you know what to add there? Well, we said that the model for this edit form is the new task variable. That's right here. And so then each of our fields is going to be one property in that class. So in this case, this is task. If we had more fields, it would be other fields here. Now, when you submit, you don't pass any data through as a parameter. You just say submit because the add task has access to that model that we used for our form. Therefore, we can just grab that value right away. Now, let's say new task equals new task model to reset that value after we add the task to the list. Okay, I'm going a little fast here because I want to get through this part. It's less about this form here and more about how we use this as a component. But I do want to explain what I'm doing so that you can follow along and try it out and know why I'm doing what I'm doing. I don't want to just have this skip forward option where you miss how it works so you can never do it or replicate yourself. Okay, so that's why I'm explaining it, but I am explaining it a little fast. At some point, I'll probably cover forms in more depth. Again, I've covered that in the course, but obviously not everyone can afford the course or want to buy the course. That's fine. I'll try doing my best to explain as much as possible here. Okay? So we have the task list. We're adding a task to our list, but we have to display our list somewhere. So let's come down here. We're going to add a unordered list. And in here, I'm going to say @for each. So that @ again says, okay, there's C# code coming. In this case, a for each for each task in task list. Let's lowercase that. All right, so for each task in task list, we want to do something. Now, let's for now just put a list item here, li, and inside here we're going to say at task.task, which sounds redundant, but that's the actual task to display, not the Boolean. We'll get to that in just a minute. But I wanted to show you something working, okay? So here's our task list, basic task list. Let's run this, try it out, and then we're going to make it better, okay? So /task list, there's a task list, test. Notice test is now right underneath here. And I'm not going back to the server every time I do this. It's staying on the client side. There's no full page refresh. Okay, so now we're adding to our list whenever we type something in here. And when I say there's no server-side refresh, what I mean by that is it's not reloading the entire page, just a little portion of it. It's much, much more efficient. And it gives the user a great experience because it feels like a native desktop application, which is what a single page application is, also known as a SPA, S-P-A. Okay, so that's our task list. Now, if we go off it and then come back to it, it's empty because it's not storing it anywhere. All right. Now, if you want to store in a database, this is C# code. Have this call your class library that has data access code for SQL or Cosmos DB or whatever you want to call, and it will save it into those locations. When you load it up, you could load up this task list from a database. Not a problem. Okay, so this is just the UI code, and you don't want to put data access right here, but you can call a class library and have it do the work. Okay, so it's just C# code. That's all it is. All right, now let's make this a little bit more interesting. First of all, I'm going to style this because right now the style is horrible. It's ugly. And while I may be known for doing ugly things, I would like to do a little bit better than that. So let's start with our edit form. We're going to say class equals. Now, edit form is specific to Blazor, and it is going to get translated into a form tag. So anything you put in this that's not used by Blazor, so models being used by Blazor, and so is onValidSubmit, as is onSubmit and onInValidSubmit. But if it's not being evaluated by Blazor, it's just going to drop that down onto the actual form tag. So, for example, class is not being evaluated by Blazor, but that we drop down onto the form tag. So we can do things like this, where we say form inline, and space my for a margin in the y direction. I want a margin of 2. So I'm going to give it a little bit of space around this vertically, so top and bottom. And 2 means a certain height. There's 0 through, I think, 5. Okay, so there's my class for that. And then I'll style a little bit. Let's style our input as well, our input text. So class equals form control and also margin in the x direction of 2. All right, I give it some space on the left and right, which means that it won't be running into our button, which, by the way, our button should have a class as well. We'll say btn and btn dash outline dash, let's go with primary. All right, so there's our button that's styled. Let's style our list now to say class equals list group. And you may be wondering, where am I getting all these classes from and why am I adding these classes here? This is based upon Bootstrap 4. Now, if you're wondering, some people are really against Bootstrap. They think it's heavy and overused, kind of like jQuery used to be, and maybe still is. But with .NET Core, we use Bootstrap 4, but just the CSS. So we're not even using the JavaScript side of this unless you want to. So just the CSS is very light, and it gives us a nice, commonly used formatting experience. So I would say don't knock it. If you want to replace it, you can, but start with this because this is so easy to use. So getbootstrap.com, and then there's a documentation. Go to documentation and look at all you can do there. Okay, so list item. So for list item, I want to say list group item, and I'm going to say list group item. Let's go with success. And a margin in the Y direction of 1. And it looks like I didn't put it in a class. Let's cut that out. Class equals. There we go. So now we have some better formatting on our page. Let's look at what it looks like. We can see if we can go any further than this. I think this is probably good. I looked over it before I did this video. Yes, I did it before. Just to make sure. Because I'm not the best at design, but I think this looks a little better. Okay. Now, this is a task list. It would make sense that once you put a task on the list, that you're able to cross it off. How do we do that? Well, let's add a little bit of value to this and a little bit of interactivity. So let's start with a check on this. So let's cut this out. I'm going to say if task is complete. So this is the true right now. I'm going to paste it in here. And I have an else. And paste it in again. So it's the exact same copy twice. But make some changes. This is the one where it's complete. So let's change this from success, which is that green, to secondary, which is more of a gray. All right? So that's the first thing we're going to do. Then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to have an on click. I'm going to put an enter key before we have our close brackets. So let's get this formatted correctly. There we go. And here I'm going to have an @on click. Now, if you've worked with WinForms or WPF, this may seem really familiar. And it should, because it's an event. And that's what it is. Let's say equals. Now, here's a little bit of a trick. You could put a method name. So like add task, you put that in there. And it would call the add task method. Notice no parens. But sometimes you don't want to create a whole method for this, or you want to pass parameters. So what you do instead is you do this. Open parens twice, close parens once, and then have your arrow, and then have close parens, but inside the close parens, call some code or do some type of task or action. In this case, I want to say task.isComplete equals not task.isComplete. Basically flip that bit. Okay? That's all we're going to do. Notice not even a semicolon at the end. It's just one line of C# code. Now I could call a method here and pass in a parameter. I could do that. But I'm going to do just this one line here. Now, the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this @task.task out. This is the actual text. I'm going to wrap it in del, which is going to do a crossed off line or a strike through. Okay? So that's my version of the completed task. Now let's do the on click again. Let's copy this. And I will paste it in. Well, first of all, let's format this. Formatting is hard when you have all these different languages mixed in together on one page. Just so you know, that's why they're kind of squirrely. So now we have an on click again. Same code because it's just flipping the bit. So it's false, it'll be true. If it's true, it'll be false. That's all it's going to do. And that's all we have to do. Now, in the real world, if we wanted to record that this was completing, we would actually call a method. And that method would flip the bit, but it would also send out to the database and say, hey, this has been completed or reactivated. But I don't think we're quite done yet because I want to do something else up here. Now, if you're familiar with Bootstrap at all, you'll know that Bootstrap has the capability of doing a progress bar. So let's do @if task list .count is greater than 0. So only show this if there is a task in the task list. Div class equals progress. And also let's give it a margin in the Y direction, and that's the 2 margin width. Okay? And then in here we'll say div class equals progress bar. And let's just do progress bar. Well, I'm not going to do animated. And we'll say the role equals progress bar. And we'll say the style equals the width, colon, and then you give it a percentage. So you say like 75%, something like that. But we're going to change it to be a dynamic value in just a minute. And then we'll say the aria value min equals 0. We're going to start at 0. And the aria value max is going to be 100. And inside of here, we're actually going to put the percentage done, which you don't have yet. Okay? So it'll be the same 75%. So let's figure out how to do this 75%. I think the way I'm going to do it is down here in my code, I'm going to create a read-only property, a private read-only property, private int %done. Notice I'm still using the lowercase because it's a private. We'll say get, and then in here I'll say return task list .count, but we're going to use the count extension, which allows us to count values inside. So count x dot is complete. So only count the ones that are complete. We're going to multiply those by 100. And then that number is going to be divided by the task list .count. And that's the actual count, the total. So let's just say we have 4 items in the list, one of which is complete. So we're going to have 1 complete, so that's going to be 1 times 100, that's 100, divided by the total, which is 4. That's 25. So that's the whole number for the percentage. Okay? So now what we can do is take this %done, and up here in the progress bar, replace just these values right here. So at and the %done. Now that yells at me. It's not really a big fan of this because it's got a percentage sign. It's not sure what to do here. I'm going to wrap this in parens. And what that does is it tells C# that if you say at and then open parens, it's saying just what's in the parens is code. That's it. Ignore the rest. Now it might not catch up with me or the editor, that's okay, but it should work. We do the same thing down here, and I'll even put the % sign afterwards the same way. And now let's hit save. So this progress bar should only show up if we have a value that's greater than 0, a list item of at least 1, and then it will show a different percentage based upon how many are marked as complete. Let's run this. Let's go to our task list. All right, test. Notice no progress bar. Now it's a progress bar, and it says 0%. You can hardly see it there, but it's there. We're going to say, add a few more tests. All right, so there are the tests, or tasks. Let's cross one off. Let's cross this one off right here. I'm going to click it. Now it's at 14%. It's grayed out. It's got a line through it. I can just click all day, and I can unclick as well. So this allows us to create a dynamic task list and make the most of our single page application. Kind of cool. It's all done on the client side, very, very responsive, very, very fast. And just a really quick side note, if you're wondering about scalability, this is very, very scalable. I think the typical project is about 200K of memory that it takes up as far as for the transfer, the SignalR transfer. So you can put a lot of actions or a lot of active profiles at once on a server and be just fine with this. So load should not be a problem in the vast majority of cases. If it becomes a problem, you can actually offload your SignalR traffic onto a SignalR server, like an Azure SignalR service, and make it even more performant, and then scale it across multiple instances. So just so you know. All right, let's get back to this. Now we have a working task list, but I want to do one more. Actually, no, I don't. Let's leave it like this. This sounds good. So let's make this now into a component. Okay, we're going to put it right in the home page. We'll replace this section right here. All right, so let's go to the home page. Index, let's get rid of survey prompt. I want to put not one task list, I want 3 task lists on the front page. So I'm going to create a div with a class equal to row, and then a div with a class equal to call medium 4. Meaning it takes up 4 of the 12 spots, 4 of the 12 columns, and in medium or higher size. All right, so let's do, so there's 3 different ones. Inside here, I'm going to say task list. Now, where'd that come from? That's the name of my component. Now, it's not referencing the page. It's referencing the actual name of the component, task list. So the name of the file is actually the name of the class as well. And that class is now accessible over here because it's called task list. And so I can create a component like a div or anything else in HTML, but it's actually the task list. Let me just prove this. Let's run this. This is the home page. I now have 3 task lists. Let's start typing in one of them. Notice that only the one task list has a test in it. And if I do something different in other ones, I can do that. And if I complete one, it doesn't complete all of them. And it knows each individually how they all work, which is pretty cool. These are all individual components. All right? So that's what I was trying to show you, because that's really the crux of Blazor, is that you don't build this one massive page. You build small components and then you put them together like Lego bricks, where you piece them together, you kind of create new and interesting pages based upon what you want to use it for. You might say, you know what? Actually, I want to have that last column be a counter instead. Not a problem. Take that out and say counter. How do I know what there's a counter there? Well, because there's a component called counter. All right. So now if we run this, we'll have 2 task lists and a counter. There we go. There's our counter, task list, progress bar, the whole thing. All right. So all independent, all on the same page. You can kind of compose these as necessary. All right. So this navigation page here, by the way, this navigation bar, this is actually a component. This is actually what could be a full page, but it's not. Now, what if we said, you know what? We don't want you to go to a task list on its own. We don't want you to go to /task list. What we do? Well, all we need to do is take off this page directive. Now there's no page directive, so I can't go to /task list, but it still works as a component. But now if I do /task list, it says, sorry, there's nothing at this address. Go home, it's still here, it still works just fine. All right? So that's how a component works. But why would you ever have 2 task lists or 3 on the same page? It would seem like the only reason you'd do that is if you had this one page that maybe is the master task list for a meeting, where you had all the different people's names on there and a list for each person. That seems to make more sense, right? Well, we can do that. So we're going to pass information into this list and say, hey, this is Tim's list, or this is Sue's list. How do you do that? Well, the first thing we need to do is come down to our code. And in here, I'm going to create a parameter. Let's see it, prop. I'll make it public. And this is going to be a string. We'll call this name. Now I'm keeping this simple for the demo purposes. If you were going to do this in a working environment, this might be an ID number of the person, which would then go look in the database, find out who that person is, and then load the information about that person. But in our case, a name will suffice just to show we're passing data into our page. You just need this parameter here. That's saying, yep, you can pass in that value through the parameter. Okay, and the parameter is called name. Now, let's come up here, and for task list, I'm going to have an if. Actually, I'm not even going to have an if statement. I could wrap this in an if statement and say, if there's no name, then don't put a name, or just say your task list. But I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to say at name apostrophe s task list. So Tim's task list, Sue's task list. All right? That's going to use that parameter. Okay? Let's save this. Let's go back to our index page. We need to make a change here. So task list, I'm going to say right inside here, I'm going to say name. Notice you have that parameter now. And I'll say Tim. And for this one, I'm going to say name equals Sue. And let's do it one more time. So I'll copy and paste this again instead of counter. And this time I'm going to say Mary. So Tim, Sue, and Mary are in a meeting. And we've got this master page we're going to pull up where as we're taking notes in the meeting, we're going to say fix the bugs and debug more and do better. Those are my tasks. And Sue's task, implement new feature, do other cool stuff. Okay? And Mary, she had the job of wash the lambs. Poor Mary's typecast. All right? And, I don't know, talk with CEO. All right? And so I can look at this and go, okay, I fixed the bugs. And, Sue, of course, she did cool stuff. And Mary's just on top of it. Okay? We can do this right in the meeting. We can create this one page, and if this was hooked up with a database, which it can do, then you can have all this stuff filled in on one screen, kind of like a dashboard screen for the meeting. And then when you're done the meeting, you have all this updated, and you can close out, and everybody has the information they need about what's going on and what their part is. So just using just a little task list like this, you can really elevate what you can do because you can put those components together in new and interesting ways. Or maybe you want to have this fetch data page. Maybe you want to have over here a task list of things to do based upon the weather forecast. It sounds silly, but maybe. Okay? Or a counter page. Maybe, in dev, you have a task list on every page where you say, enter things to fix here. Okay? That's possible. But these components, you can just put wherever you want. Now that you've built a component, you can put it wherever you want. You can even nest components inside of components. And you can nest components inside of components that are inside of components. So this is really a modular system that's really flexible and allows you to build these really complex interactive pages that are really just simple at their core. And that's really ideal. Again, let's look at our task list. Even with all the complexity we added, we have 59 lines of code between our code and our HTML for this task list. In fact, I could probably get rid of a couple of them right here. And that one at the end as well. 57. 57 lines of something. So we have from 37 to 57, that's 20 lines of C# code and 35 lines of HTML and Razor syntax. And with that, I have a component that's a task list. Now, I can put that onto a page and create multiple of those and have this really cool dashboard that just basically says add 3 task lists. Okay? So you can do a database lookup on this page and say, give me a list of all the people in our meeting. List of all the people, and then it passes the ID in for each of those. The task list looks it up and puts their task list together for each of those on here, and then your page now dynamically shows who's in the meeting and what their task list is and what the status is of all those tasks. So really easy to compose, really easy to take small little bits and put them together. So that is a Razor component. Now, again, I called it Blazor components because it feels a little bit more like that's what is understandable, is that it's Blazor Server and its components. But they're called Razor components, and they can be Blazor pages, but really every Blazor page is just a component that you can then put inside of another page or component. Okay? I know it's a little tricky to get your mind wrapped around the naming of this, and naming is really hard, as even Microsoft shows. But the power of this is really impressive. So that's it for this video. What I'd love for you to do is leave a note down in the comments and let me know what your thoughts are on Razor components or Blazor Server components, whatever you want to call them. Okay, but these component ideas. Let me know, what are your thoughts? Do you love them? Do you understand them? Is there more you'd like to see explained and how to use them? Let me know. And if you have suggestions, I'll put in the suggestion list. And we'll go from there. Okay? Thanks for watching. And as always, I am Tim Corey.